I want to talk about my 1972 Ossa 250 Mick Andrews Replica. By the late 60s, the top riders in the world were British, and Spain had wanted to break into the trials market. Bultaco had previously hired Sammy Miller to develop a trials bike for them and were very successful. Ossa approached Mick Andrews in 1970 and asked him to develop a bike. This is the result. He promptly won the 71 and 72 European Championships in the days before there was a World Championship. That event became the World Championship Series run by the FIM now. And he won the 1971, 1972, and 1973 6 days trial, Scottish 6 days, which is the toughest trial in the world. And he commanded it on one of these bikes. The bikes are pretty unique. 244 cc's, about 18 horsepower, same amount of foot-pounds of torque. And like most trials bikes of the day, a double cradle frame with the engine hung between it. This one, the frame doesn't go under the engine. The engine forms part of the frame. There's usually a skid plate. Sadly, I've broken mine. I guess I'm really tough on them. And it's being repaired now, or actually I'm having a new one built. But let's look at some of the other features. It's got Acron front rim. This one's rimless. An Acron rear. This one has a rim on it. The little lip is what I mean there. And everything was done to keep the weight low. It weighs about 195 pounds as delivered. And partly that's due to aluminum fenders, front and rear. Plastic wasn't used very much, although shortly thereafter it became the norm. It's a fiberglass tank, fiberglass side panels, and aluminum triple clamps, bars. Everything's done to try to keep the weight as low as possible. There's some unique features on the Ossa that aren't on other Spanish bikes. For example, this is an IRZ carb. The ignition is electronic. The other trials bikes were primarily FEMSA or Motoplat points. It kickstarts here on the left instead of on the right, although some other bikes kickstart on the left as well. And it's got this decompression lever. You see here underneath the clutch, there's this little lever here which actuates on the motor this valve to open the head to the atmosphere. And that's because for some reason Spain could never get the brakes right. If you kind of glanced at water, they'd disappear. And the decompression valve gave you a little bit of engine braking on a downhill so you didn't just run out of room. As a result, it's an easy bike to start. The electronic ignition and the carb, although most people replace that carb with a Mikuni. One of the weird things about it is you can see it because I got the skid plate off. Underneath the engine here, there's these wires that come from the stator that, run everything. They get crushed and then that can cause a problem. So I'm going to have to do something about that. But otherwise, with its 54-inch wheelbase, it's very light, agile, steers nicely, and the motor's just beautiful. A lot of flywheel effect, but crisp throttle response as well. One of my complaints is these foot pegs, very similar for the time to any other trials bike. They're so small and they're very high. Nowadays they'd be down around this area, but this is the way they all were back then. And I don't really want to change it because I want to keep it as stock as possible. And it's got these chain tensioners like most trials bikes of the time to keep the chain on under all kinds of up and down conditions. Well, I hope you've enjoyed that. It's a fun bike to ride. Talk to you next time.